Day one, I wanted to get to the end of December as soon as possible, my favorite time of the year. In the meantime, it was November, and it was raining. I stomped through the puddles back home, the wind blowing in my face. It was raining lightly, and it was cold. I wanted to be at home, warm and cozy, as soon as possible. I didn't have long to walk, about 10 minutes, but I wanted to lock myself in the house and not go outside. I walked fast. I didn't even turn on the music. I was afraid of getting my headphones wet. When I entered the entrance, I immediately ran up the stairs to my floor. Mom opened the door for me. "Why are you taking so long to catch a cold?" She spoke with apprehension. Once at the table with my parents at home, with a mug of hot tea, I thawed out, and the sad thoughts faded into the background. Outside, the weather was getting worse, but it's outside the window, and I'm here at home. We are spending this evening with our family. We are sitting in the kitchen, drinking tea, discussing plans for the upcoming holidays. When the clock showed 11 p.m., the parents got up from the table. "Okay, we'll go," Dad said, looking at his watch. My parents were going to the country. I had to pick up the things that had been there since the summer. I was even glad to be alone for a few days. No, I wasn't planning on doing anything like that, but there will be new opportunities anyway. You can listen to music late, clean up when you want, and go to bed later. In short, I was planning to have a good time these days. Yesterday, after learning about my parents' plans, I called my friend Vita. "Come to my place one of these days. My parents are gone. I'm home alone," I suggested, to which I received a negative response. "No, I can't. It's school." Indeed, even though I was left alone, no one canceled the lessons. And whether you want to or not, you also have to get up at 7 a.m. and stomp to the other end of the street. My mom distracted me from these thoughts. "So, look, I'll explain everything now," she said in a hurry. "There are groceries in the fridge. When it's over, you can take the money from the bedside table in our room. Just don't spend too much. He can cook, he won't starve." Dad interrupted. "That's it. Let's get out. We're coming so late." The parents hurriedly got dressed and, taking a couple of bags, closed the door behind them. But then the door opened again, with a sense of excitement. I turned on the music and went to the kitchen to wash the dishes. Someone has to clean up the consequences of our tea drinking. After washing 3 mugs, I went to my room to get another one. He liked to drink coffee in the room in the morning. Returning to the kitchen, I hummed the tune of my favorite song, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something strange. I turned around. The door was wide open. Apparently, Mom forgot to close the door, and now the whole entrance could enjoy my music. It's kind of inconvenient. I hurried to close the door. After making sure that it latched to the end, he turned the key. We had an old door. Efforts had to be made to close it completely. After washing the unfortunate mug, I moved to my room. The lessons won't do themselves. I didn't like math, and this time it was very difficult for me. The numbers got mixed up, and the examples merged into a homogeneous, muddled mass of numbers and letters and more music. The words of the song stuck in my head and sounded ahead. I decided to try to concentrate and reached for my phone to turn it down. Looking away from the notebook, I noticed the same oddity again. The front door was open. I just sat there for a few seconds and thought about what I was seeing. This happens when a person sees something unusual, how the door was open again. Stories about burglars, thieves who rob apartments while no one is around immediately crept into my head. The bastards saw that our parents had left and decided to rob us. What if they have guns? In any case, sitting in your room as if nothing had happened is stupid. I flew to the door, slammed it shut, turned the key in the lock, closed it twice, leaving the key in the door. Then I slipped into the kitchen, trying not to make any noise. There he took the first knife he saw and went deeper into the apartment. After turning on the lights everywhere and opening all the cupboards where the criminals were supposed to be sitting, I found no one. The apartment was completely empty, but still, the fear and the feeling of someone's presence remained. Then, for about an hour, I walked around the apartment in silence, hoping to understand the reason. But as luck would have it, everything looked calm. The reason I was trying so hard to find, or rather the absence of this very reason, was very alarming. I sat back down at the table. Math again. Now that she had only a recent event in mind, it was even harder. "Hi, did you do the math?" I called for help. "What about math?" "Not yet, I'm working on Russian." They asked. Of course, it won't take forever to do all this. Vitya's tired voice rang out. "Okay, I was thinking of copying it." "Well, at least take off your Russian. Your head won't boil anymore." "Okay, I'll throw it off as soon as I do." There were 3 short rings on the phone. Well, one less subject. I struggled with the examples for another half hour, but in the end, all the tasks were solved. When I opened my diary entries, I was stunned. "Prepare for the test." The inscription was sloppy. It was almost 1 o'clock, and I still had to prepare for the test. After sitting in the room for another 10 minutes, I went to the kitchen to make coffee. In such a situation, there is nowhere without it. While the kettle was boiling, I stared intently at the front door. What was that? I still haven't found the answer to this question. I cautiously approached the door and pulled it open. Closed. My mood immediately changed. It's become easier somehow. Maybe there was nothing. After all, the door is closed. Then I heard the increasing whistle of the kettle. I rather went to pour myself boiling water into a mug with pre-prepared coffee. Going to my room with a mug, I was stunned when I saw Nastya's door open again. My knees began to shake and a lump formed in my throat. A lump of fear. Fear. That's exactly the feeling that overwhelmed me. I remember exactly how I locked the door and how it turned out to be open. I quickly slammed the door with such force that it seemed like it would fly off its hinges. He turned the key, which was still stuck in the lock. Click, click, 2 turns. He stood there for a few minutes with a cup of coffee in his hand. Then I carefully opened the door and peered through the crack into the entrance. Everything was in its place, but I still frantically tried to discern the reasons for such strange events in the ordinary entrance. I stood there for 10 minutes, maybe 20. I didn't feel the time at all at that moment. There was only one task in my head: to find something or someone in the entrance who opened the door. A phone call from the room brought me out of the transom. At that moment, I came to my senses, closed the door, turned the key. 2 clicks. I tried the handle just in case. The door is closed. Vitya called, said he had sent me his homework in Russian, but was not sure of the spelling of a few words. The door is closed. Alarm clocks to make sure you don't oversleep. I pulled off the covers, flopped down on the bed, and immediately fell asleep, without even having time to think about today's story with the door. Day 2. The next day, I was walking home from school again. Walking through dark playgrounds and courtyards was somehow uncomfortable. I wasn't afraid of the dark, but the yards were empty, except for the distant sound of children's screams from the playground and the barking of dogs. I felt a little lonely and detached from the world. But knowing that I was alone at home, I could afford anything. I braced up a bit and walked a little faster. It was wet outside, and leaves were sticking to the seams. Everything reminded me that the further it got, the worse it got. Getting up early in the morning for school will be harder and harder, and after that, it will make you sleepy. I imagined that feeling when the alarm goes off and it's dark outside, and it feels like it's still night. I have to go somewhere in the middle of the night. I hate this feeling. A call came faintly from my pocket. I took out my phone. A lot of small rainbow raindrops immediately appeared on the screen. Dad was calling. I put the phone to my ear. Hello, hello. Hello, Vanya. Mom and I are a little late for a few days. There are more cases. The sewer is clogged up again. It's going to be here for a long time. Okay, Dad. I'm walking from school now. I'll start cooking as soon as I get there. Well done. Take care of yourself, please. Good. You know, I'd like to tell you something strange that happened to me yesterday. There was silence on the phone, and I continued. Yesterday, when I returned home from school, someone opened our front door, although I definitely locked it. Honestly, I checked it several times, but it was opened by someone, you know? Why didn't you call us? Or at least didn't call the police? Well, somehow, I hesitated. Really, why didn't I call the police? Okay, come on, be careful. If anything, call us, and preferably the police. Number 112, if anything. Okay, bye. I hung up the phone. I had mixed feelings about the call. On the one hand, I was left alone for a few more days, but on the other, I would have to cook, clean, and do other housework myself. After these thoughts, I decided to invite Vitya to my place again. One person will be bored at home, but at least we'll have tea with a friend and talk. I took out my phone again. Vitya picked up the phone almost immediately. Hi, do you want to stop by my place? In half an hour. Hi, what about DZ? I don't want to get a bad grade again. So we didn't seem to be asked. There were tests today, did you forget? Oh, yes, that's right. Then wait for me in 30-40 minutes. What's taking so long? I'm not at home just now, visiting my aunt. I'm going to come to you from her. Okay, I'm waiting. After chatting with a friend, I didn't notice how I was already approaching the house. Yes or no? And there's still a whole evening ahead. I quickly ran up the steps to my 8th floor of the house. Suddenly, the home phone rang. I picked up the phone with interest. An old man's voice rang out. Hello, hello, I answered, and there was an awkward pause. You probably don't remember me. I live on top. I've known you since you were born, she said kindly. I didn't really like this kind of conversation, so I decided to bring the dialogue closer to the topic. I see. Why call this? Your mom helps me out occasionally when I'm sick, but they've gone, and I'm counting on you alone. Well, let me get up, but how long will it take? No, granddaughter, not for long. I agreed with Irina Anatolievna, that was her name, that I would visit her in 10 minutes. Finally, I decided to ask her a question that interests me. How do you know that my parents have left? I was coming down the stairs and met them. They said they were leaving. I had to call Vita and cancel the meeting. I could tell by his voice that he was a little upset. After packing my things, I went up to her floor, having previously closed the door to the apartment. She said her door was open, so I went in. She asked me to cook something for her for dinner from the food that was there. I quickly cooked the porridge, put it on 2 plates, and brought it to her room. We talked for a while during the meal. How long have I been unable to get out of bed? You are my only hope, she thanked me. It was getting close to night. I sat in her room and listened to stories about her youth. about the Soviet Union. I can't say that I wasn't interested, rather sad. My youth has passed without grandchildren or relatives. I'll be an old man someday too. Someone will take care of me. Her apartment had a special atmosphere of a bygone era. Old record players crying through the curtains. It means that I overslept at school. I looked at the time, 7:40, so I immediately got out of bed. Without wasting a minute, I ran and washed up. Because I couldn't be late for biology, I decided to grab some sandwiches while I get dressed and leave the house. When I got ready, I ran outside and went to school. It was almost light now, so I had to run. The day went by as usual at school, and now I was walking up the steps to my apartment. After entering the apartment and undressing, I went to the kitchen. He'll cook up something to eat. After I had a bite to eat, I did my homework somehow and sat on the bed with the phone. I flipped through the social network until nightfall. It's already 1 o'clock. It was dark, with only the light from the phone slightly illuminating the room on the sides. The rest of the room was in darkness. The silhouettes of a closet, a chair, and clothes on it were barely discernible. A warning message appeared on the phone screen, stating that less than 20% was left on the phone. It is necessary to connect the charger. Sooner or later, you'll have to get up from your perch. Maybe I'm lucky and the charger is on the bedside table. I turned the phone over and lit up the room. After being in a room without light for a long time, my eyes got used to the darkness, allowing me to see the outlines of objects. Here's a chair with clothes hanging on it. The computer light flashes periodically. The cabinet door is glossy, and the light from the screen is faintly reflected from it. I saw a barely discernible white in the doorway. Fear hit my body with thousands of impulses, making me jerk on the spot. Madness. It stood and stared at nothing, at a point next to me, but not at me. I reflexively turned on the light, not taking my eyes off it, hoping that it would disappear. The chandelier flooded the room with light, and I saw him in full glory. A pale face with a wide smile and round eyes, as if they existed separately from this creature. Part of his long curved neck was visible, but the rest of his body was unnaturally swallowed up by darkness. A second passed, then two, and it took a step back, completely disappearing into the darkness of the corridor. It was as if no light penetrated outside the room. I was shaking. I was panicking. My thoughts left my head, and there was only one question left. What was that? I was afraid to even breathe, and tried to do it as quietly as possible. I tried to move at least a finger, but I was held down by the strongest horror of what I saw. I froze, waiting. There's a gray void in my head. I can't miss a single thought. A cascade of creepy assumptions flew all over his body with goosebumps. Without understanding why, I carefully got out of bed and walked over to the table. There, in a drawer, I took a penknife that a friend had given me. Turning my gaze to the door, I was stunned. The door was closed, so I was left standing with shaking knees and a knife in my hands in the middle of the room. I didn't stand there for more than 10 minutes, but it seemed like an endless time to me. My body regained control and I moved towards the door. With a gun in my hand, I took a small step closer to her. Maybe there was nothing. I leaned my ear against it, trying to understand the situation in the hallway. "Where are you going?" came a creepy voice from the other side of the door, which sent a jolt of fear through me again. There was only an unlocked door separating me from him. I jumped back abruptly, and then I wanted to shrink to microscopic size, to cease to exist, anything rather than be alone with him. It's something that couldn't exist in our world, and it knew perfectly well that I was the only one in this room. But still, any unnecessary action could provoke the creature. In the agony of fear, it certainly did not seem to me that it would not harm me. Whatever was behind the door could easily come inside at any moment, right to me. With all my efforts, I pulled the chest of drawers up to the door, trying not to make any noise. Fortunately, it opened inside. Without hesitation, not for a second, I grabbed the phone and dialed a short number, 112. A few seconds later, a female voice answered me. The operator also had to be persuaded to call an outfit. After the short beeps, I felt even more scared. After all, there was a deathly silence in which I was left alone, or maybe not alone. I do not know where she is now, still standing under the door. I don't know how much time passed, but I remained standing by the window behind the closet, holding the phone in my hand. I listened into the void and noticed that in the distance, I heard the sounds of a siren. A few minutes later, the sound increased, and through the window, a red and blue flashing light faintly illuminated the ceiling of the room. The outfit ran out of the car and ran to my entrance. A few seconds later, as everyone had already disappeared through the door, an inhuman scream was heard. Heart-rending screams, apparently from the police, mixed with wild laughter. I knew who it belonged to, that being. Now I had no doubt that it was dangerous. All this was happening right next to me on the landing. Panic washed over me. I couldn't even hold back a scream. Even an armed police squad couldn't resist this bullshit that was staring at me through the crack. Thoughts filled my head. I wanted to believe it was a nightmare. I didn't know what to do. I was exhausted. Day 4. I didn't notice when I passed out, but I woke up lying on the floor. It was getting light. Hearing the sounds of sirens and voices, I began to slowly think. When I saw the door open, I realized that it was in my room. The sun was shining on the apartment, and it didn't seem so scary anymore. Voices of people could be heard in the entrance, who were discussing something violently. I need to get to people, because during my stay in the room, I was always alone. The missing policemen were noticed. Investigators and operatives were sent. I could feel safe around them. I opened the door to the entrance. She was being chased by worried police officers. Someone was actively arguing about some of their own affairs. Others called the department, probably. "Get out of here," one policeman sent me. I was about to go outside, but I saw that the floor above, where Irina Anatolyevna lived, had an open door. I was wary. I went in after knocking on her door. No one answered, and yet, for some reason, I went on. Granny called from the other end of the apartment. I went to her. She was standing in the kitchen with 2 cups of tea. I gladly sat down next to her. I told her everything that had happened to me during those days. Everything except meeting that creature. She listened with interest. She even told me that she had also heard noises in my apartment. It was just nice to see at least some familiar person in such a stressful state. Her warm, calm voice was soothing. I felt at home for the first time these days. Sometimes I noticed that Irina Anatolyevna hung up and answered me after a few seconds. Apparently, she hasn't recovered yet. This was evidenced by her pale skin. "You know, honey, I've been feeling really bad lately. Come and see me tomorrow." Her voice began to alarm me. I thought it would be better to go outside and see the daylight, since all the windows of my neighbor were curtained. The only light came through the threadbare curtains. I started to get up from my chair as she raised her voice and asked me to sit still. "I'm just going to call my mom and ask how she's doing." Good. I dialed a familiar number. A few seconds later, she picked up the phone. "Hello." "Hi, I'm so glad to hear from you. Are you okay there?" "No, yes. I miss you very much. By the way, I'm sitting at Irina Anatolievna's." "Who is Irina Anatolievna?" "Well, Grandma, the upstairs neighbor. Forgive me, what are you doing in someone else's apartment?" She didn't mind, so I knocked and went in. Juan, she died 4 days ago. Even before we left, I was taken aback when I hung up the phone and decided to leave immediately. And then, the grandmother screamed in an inhuman voice from the kitchen. "Stay with me." I rushed to the exit. The corridor was endless. The door was impossibly far away. I tried my best to get to her as quickly as possible, hearing the nasty screams of the grandmother from behind. The time lasted infinitely long. I got lost in the walls of the apartment. I couldn't figure out which way to turn. Along the way, there were sudden turns, strange doors that could not lead anywhere. There was a sharp pain in my arm. Grandma dug her sharp claws into my left shoulder. I knew that if I made even one mistake, it would be the end. Seeing the cherished door ahead, I pulled the handle. Closed. Although I was sure that when I went to her, I did not lock the door, and there was no way she could have done it. Out of desperation, I began pounding on the door with my fists. With all the strength I could muster, the whole space was distorted. Random shadows flickered in the dark corridors. Bright light flooded the apartment. One of the operatives opened the door from the outside. "What are you doing here?" He was taken aback when he saw my hand. "So, let's get out of here. This investigation is underway." I got to my feet and saw that it was already dark outside the window. Has it been that long? I couldn't figure out how it happened. I went to see her in the morning and came back in the evening. But I haven't been to her place for 2 hours. But that wasn't what I was worried about. What was in that apartment bothered me. What is it anyway? Why is it there? And what does it want from me? With the onset of darkness came fear. There were policemen nearby. Yes, they ignored me for some reason. But they were, and I wasn't alone. So I could relax on the street. I was wondering where to go next. I'm safe among people now. The police won't be at home forever. So I have to go there while the circumstances are right. When I saw that the yard and the entrance were empty, how can this be? It's been 20 minutes at most. No one could close the case on this. Looking at my watch, I became more and more convinced that everything was here for a reason. The time is at 8 in the evening. I wanted to escape from there, to escape from the darkness. The phone suddenly rang in my pocket. Mom called. "Hello, we're on our way. We'll be home in an hour. Clean up after yourself and cook dinner." Yes, well, I rejoiced. Mom's calm voice immediately changed my condition. Now, it's pointless to sit outside. I need to go home and wait for my mom, who will come soon. When I entered the apartment, I didn't even know if I should close the door. I decided to leave the lock open so that Mom wouldn't look for the keys and come in as soon as possible. I was on pins and needles. I looked at my watch every minute. I didn't know what to do with myself. So I lay down on the bed and started replaying in my head the moment when Mom would come and this whole nightmare would end. An hour passed. Something was wrong. It's been a long time, and she hasn't called. Maybe something happened. I started to panic outright. When this feeling overwhelmed me, I snapped and dialed the number. "Hi, what are you coming?" "Hi, it's not far from the city. I'll be there in half an hour." "Okay, I'm waiting," I said happily and hung up. I felt relieved, and a ticklish sense of impending joy appeared in my chest. I felt confident. Is it calmer now? Drowsiness came over me, and I dozed off while waiting for my mom.